Hey, beautiful, please consider subscribing to our channel if you've been enjoying these stories. Your support helps a lot. Aid us in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The sun cast golden light across the porch as Walter leaned back in his worn rocking chair, a chipped ceramic mug cradled in his weathered hands. Steam rising from the coffee as birds chirped lazily in the nearby trees. His land stretched out before him, fields he had tended for decades dotted with wildflowers, the scent of honeysuckle drifting in the breeze. It was peace, pure and uninterrupted, that peace shattered with a sharp rap on the wooden fence. Post a sound too sharp, too artificial. A woman stood just outside the gate, arms crossed, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Are you Walter Jennings?" she asked. Her voice clipped like the edges of her freshly pressed blazer, her lips painted in a harsh crimson, her hair sprayed into a helmet. "I am," Walter answered, rising slowly from the chair, his knees protesting. "Karen Mitchell, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association." She thrust a thick envelope into his chest, the corners already curling from the humidity. "Your property has been annexed into our jurisdiction, effective last month. This is your official notification of non-compliance. You have 30 days to vacate." Walter blinked at her, then at the envelope, his brow furrowed. "Non-compliance?" he asked slowly. She rolled her eyes. "Your tractor is visible from the street. Your shed doesn't match the HOA's color palette, and according to our community regulations, livestock is prohibited within zone limits, and yes, goats count." Walter stared at her, the anger building behind his calm expression. "This land's been mine for 40 years. He said that may be so," she said, flipping her clipboard with a dramatic flourish. "But the county recently rezoned this area, and your land now falls under Meadowbrook's protection standards. You didn't respond to the annexation notices, so we assumed consent." He opened the envelope, scanning the fine print, eviction language buried beneath legal jargon. "You can't just force me off my land," he said, his voice low and firm. Tilted her head with mock sympathy. "I suggest you start packing. Mr. Jennings, fines accrue daily, and non-compliance can result in legal action. You don't want that kind of trouble at your age." She pivoted sharply, heels clicking down the gravel path, her perfume trailing behind like a weaponized flowerbed. Walter watched her go, his hands trembling, the coffee forgotten and cold that night. He sat at his kitchen table under the dim glow of a single bulb, the envelope spread open beside his checkbook, and an old family photo, his wife Mary, smiling beside him on that same porch, decades ago. He picked up the rotary phone on the wall, dialing the county office line by line, each beep echoing like a countdown. They confirmed it. The rezoning had passed, quietly tucked into a broader development bill. The HOA had jumped on it, filed paperwork fast, gobbled up several lots in one fell swoop. Few neighbors had already sold their parcels, bought out at bargain prices. Walter hadn't answered the letters, thought they were junk. Now they had him boxed in. He didn't sleep that night. The walls felt too close, the silence pressing to. Heavy morning came with the sound of an engine. Walter stepped outside to see Karen and 2 HOA board members stapling a giant orange notice to his fence. It flapped in the wind, obnoxious and defiant. Final notice to vacate, 30 days or legal removal. He walked over slowly, cane tapping against the dirt path. "This is harassment," he said. Karen turned with a smile to why. "This is procedure." He clenched his jaw. "I'll come to your office. We'll talk about this like adults." Karen shrugged. "If you want to waste your time." The HOA headquarters was a whitewashed trailer parked beside the community pool, banners hanging proudly from the eaves. Walter stepped inside, the carpet stained with years of coffee and contempt. He presented his case, offered to paint the shed, move the goats, even dismantle the tractor. Shed laughter. Karen leaned back in her chair, legs crossed, smug. "This isn't about a shed, Walter. It's about standards. You don't belong in Meadowbrook." The room buzzed with the sound of whispered giggles, HOA board members flipping through documents, pretending disinterest. He stood slowly, every inch of him stiff with dignity. "My wife and I built that porch with our bare hands," he said. "My son learned to ride a bike in those fields. We buried our dog under that oak tree. I fought for this country and came home to this land." Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard. "And now we're asking you to leave it nicely." He walked out into the sun, the heat pressing on his back, his cane sunk deep into the gravel with each step. At home, he sat on the porch again, the orange notice visible from his chair like a wound on the fence. He pulled a battered folder from the drawer. Inside it were deeds, maps, photographs, tax receipts, the history of a life etched in ink. He looked up as a hawk soared overhead, its cry sharp and distant. Then he picked up the phone again, this time calling someone else, a number he hadn't used in years. "Tom, it's Walter. I need your help. I want to talk about buying some land." His voice held no hesitation, no fear, only the slow, steady certainty of a man who had decided. Wind picked up the notice, flapping wildly, but Walter sat still, the rocking chair creaking as he looked out at his land, his legacy. The storm was coming, and this time he wouldn't just weather it. The gravel crunched beneath Walter's boots as he stepped into the county records office, his breath steady, his spine straight, the same posture he carried into combat. Decades ago, Tom met him at the back entrance, a man built like an oak tree in a faded leather jacket, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You sure about this?" Tom asked, holding open the door. Walter nodded once. "I'm not giving up my home. Inside, they sat surrounded by shelves of dusty binders and humming fluorescent lights. Tom spread out maps, old zoning documents, parcels, drawn in faded ink and digital overlays glowing on his laptop. There Tom tapped a blinking cursor. That stretch of land includes the clubhouse, the pool, the front gate, and the access road. It was originally developer-owned, but the HOA never finalized the deed. They've been squatting on it under a temporary use agreement that expired last year. Walter leaned in, squinting at the boundary lines. And that means it's for sale, Tom said, his voice almost a whisper. In fact, 3 parcels are up for silent auction. The trust that holds them is dissolving. The land is cheap because no one thinks it has private value. Walter smiled, but there was no joy in it, only grim satisfaction. Then, we'll buy it better if we don't do it under your name, Tom said, already typing. We'll form an LLC, keep your name off the paperwork until it's all locked and weeks passed. Under a veil of quiet calculation, Walter met with land agents post. As a retired investor interested in green space, he bought 2 narrow strips along the HOA's border, then a third that cut directly through their main road. The fourth was the jeweled land beneath the clubhouse parking lot and half the pool's foundation. The deed changed hands in a silent office under flickering lights. No one from the HOA noticed until the fences went up. Karen's SUV screeched to a halt outside her precious clubhouse one morning, as work crews in neon vests erected 8 fencing around the parking lot. A bold white sign planted at the center: "Arrived head property night trespassing, future site of wholesome harvest fair." Walter stood just beyond the fence in his boots and overalls, arms folded, expression calm as sun stormed up, red-faced. "You can't do this. This is HOA land." Walter didn't flinch. "Got the deed right here," he said, tapping a folder under his arm. "You're bluffing." He handed her a copy. She scanned the document, her lips moving in disbelief. "This must be a mistake." "No mistake," he said. "You and your board have been using land you don't own. You never did." The next board meeting was Oscarin tried to rally the members, threatened lawsuits, demanded emergency funds be redirected to legal action, but the treasury was already low. Fines and fees couldn't cover litigation. Worse still, the clubhouse access was blocked. Members had to walk 3 blocks just to attend meetings, and tempers flared. Walter began charging access fees, not a cent under market value, every hour they used the land the LLC billed them. Karen refused to pay, trespassed anyway, climbed the fence in heels, tore her skirt on the top relay. Neighbor caught it on video, posted it to the community page. The comments were merciless. "The HOA is the real clown show. She's not even good at trespassing. This what my fees pay for." Walter didn't laugh, but his eyes twinkled when he saw installed trail cameras, posted signs, every incident documented and sent with invoices, each one more expensive than the last. The HOA board tried to shift blame, Karen claimed. Walter was harassing them, said his fencing violated aesthetics. Walter sent a formal notice through his lawyer. "This land is not part of Meadowbrook." Karen's fury became desperation. She tried to meet Walter privately, offered to buy back the land at double the purchase price. Walter declined without blinking. "This land isn't for sale," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "You're not building a farm. You're just trying to spite us." Walter raised an eyebrow. "You tried to take my home, now I'm taking yours." Piece by piece, construction equipment appeared on site within days. Bulldozers flattened the cracked pavement where the pool once sparkled. Steel beams were delivered, stacks of lumber piled high. The sounds of progress echoed through the neighborhood. Kieran could only watch as her grip unraveled. Local parents began stopping by, curious about the signs: community farm, goat petting zoo, produce scent of sawdust mixed with the promise of fresh vegetables and laughter. Karen filed a noise complaint. It was denied. Walter applied for agricultural exemption permits. They were granted. Local journalists visited, interviewed Walter in front of the torn-down clubhouse site. The story aired under the title "Veteran Reclaims Land After HOA Tries to Evict Him." The footage showed Karen stomping across the sidewalk, arms flailing. The clip went viral. Walter's mailbox filled with letters from veterans, from neighbors, from strangers, thanking him, calling him a hero. But Walter didn't do it for praise. He did it because no one had the right to erase his life with a signature and a sneer. That night, he sat on his porch again, sipping coffee, watching the fencing glow in the moonlight. Tom sat beside him. "You've turned the tables," he said. Walter nodded slowly. "And I'm just getting started." In the distance, the goats bleated softly, unaware of the war being waged in property lines and pride, but Walter knew, and he would not lose again. The sun rose over the ridgeline, casting long amber streaks across the new farmland. Once a sterile parking lot, now tilled soil-rich, with promise rows of raised beds stretching like ribs through the earth. Walter stood in the middle of it, all hands on his hips, his breath misting in the cool morning air, a shovel planted in the ground. Beside him, the scent of fresh mulch mingled with dew and diesel as contractors prepped the barn behind the fence. Karen paced like a panther in pumps, eyes burning beneath her sunglasses, a thin sheen of sweat on her forehead. Though the morning was cool, "You can't seriously be turning this into a petting zoo," she shouted. Walter didn't even glance her way. "Already have the permits, livestock compost shed, market license, and school visitation, suits all approved and posted at the gate, if you'd like a tour." "You're desecrating Meadowbrook's culture," she barked. Walter chuckled. "I'm growing carrots Karen stormed away, phone to her ear, snapping at whoever answered the call within days. HOA members began receiving flyers from Walter's farm, fresh produce sold weekly free. Community classes on canning, composting, and veteran-taught survival workshop skids entered through the new side gate drawn by the goats, the chickens, the laughter parents followed on slowly. Meadowbrook's allegiance began to fracture one by one. Neighbors who once ignored Walter's greetings now waved, asked questions, offered help. Some donated tools, others seedlings. A few quietly canceled their HOA auto payments. Karen grew frantic. She called an emergency meeting, this time in her own garage. Folding chairs crammed between boxes of holiday decorations and broken pool umbrellas, she shouted over murmurs, tried to paint Walter as a threat to order, as a hostile entity, but the board's treasurer spoke up first. Actually, his land value improvement has lifted our neighborhood's valuation by 7%. Another member cleared his throat. My daughter volunteers at the farm. He teaches her more than school does. Karen's face drained of color. You're all being manipulated, she hissed. Walter, meanwhile, continued building. He invited a local high school to paint murals on the new barn walls, scenes of sunflowers, Eagles, tractors in bold color, and Pride Media crews returned to film the transformation. Coverage grew nationally. Local university offered to partner for an agricultural capolter. Agreed. Corin had had enough. She filed a lawsuit. The claim accused Walter of malicious development of public nuisance and violating fictional zoning standards. She referenced expired maps and fake statutes. Walter's lawyer responded with a single phrase: denied on all grounds. Karen didn't stop. She trespassed one night, flashlight in hand, snipping the wire ties on the goat pen. A loud metallic clatter rang out as the latch swung open. The animals stirred, but the trail camera caught everything. The footage was crystal clear. Karen grunting as she stumbled in, heels cursing as a goat chased her toward the fence. The next day, Walter posted the video on the farm's community board with the caption, "Want it for trespassing and goat harassment." The post went viral. Again, neighbors laughed, but the county didn't. Was served a formal warning. The sheriff, a former student of Walter's, shook his head in disbelief as he handed over the notice. "You never learn, do you?" he muttered. Karen tried to pivot. She started posting on the HOA's social page about the dangers of unregulated agriculture, about allergies, about invasive plants, but photos from the farm told a different story. Smiling kids holding buckets of strawberries, veterans teaching classes on carpentry and water purification, retired teachers tutoring under the shade of the new orchard. The community had already chosen Karen's control slipped like water through clenched fists, and then the final blow came. Tom handed Walter a thick folder. The final parcel had just cleared. Escrowed. Wasn't just any lot, it was Karen's front yard, or rather what she thought was her front yard. Turns out her original property line had been misdrawn decades ago. The legal land beneath her driveway belonged to the original developer, then to the county, then finally to the land trust, now dissolved, now belonged to Walter. Walter didn't say a word. He simply had a new fence installed, a white picket line that cut diagonally across her lawn, splitting the roses from the mailbox and leaving her with half a driveway. Scream could be heard 3 streets over. She threatened to sue again, but this time even her own board ignored her. Walter sat on his porch that evening watching the sunset paint fire across the sky, a cold drink in his hand and the sound of goats softly bleating in the distance. Dome joined him, dropping into the chair beside him with a long sigh. "She's finished," Tom said. Walter didn't smile. He just nodded, slow and satisfied. "We're almost there." The cicadas hummed, and somewhere across the street a sign was quietly removed from a mailbox. The name Karen Mitchell scraped off, leaving a blank plate of shame and silence. But Walter wasn't done, not yet. Karen sat in her darkened living room, the curtains drawn, the TV glowing silently on a paused newscast, showing Walter smiling beside a group of schoolchildren, each holding a basket of vegetables. The caption below read, "The man who saved a town with a farm." She threw the remote across the room. It shattered against the wall. Her phone buzzed, but she ignored. If everyone had abandoned her, a board had resigned. One by one, no one wanted to be associated with her anymore. The HOA's lawyer dropped the case, citing frivolous action. Her mailbox was stuffed with returned complaints, unopened, unread, and her driveway now had a fence running through it. A real estate agent told her the property value had plummeted and suggested selling fast before the stigma stuck permanent. Licorin refused. This was her kingdom. She would not be dethroned that night. She climbed into her SUV and drove past the farm, glaring at the warm lights, the laughter echoing from within. She rolled down her window. "I'm not done with you, old man," she growled, but Walter didn't hear her. He was in the back orchard, kneeling with a small boy who had trouble reading. He pointed to labels on apple trees, sounding out the words together. The boy smiled wide, his missing front teeth gleaming in the moonlight. The next day, Karen showed up at the county office again, demanding revocation of Walter's permit. She was escorted out. Then she filed a noise complaint. Again, the inspector visited, walked through the orchard, petted a goat, sampled a strawberry, and left smiling. Karen screamed at him in the parking lot, "Are you all in on it with him?" The video went viral again. This time, it was picked up by a late-night comedy show. Karen became a national punchline. Walter didn't gloat. He just kept building, kept planting, but something changed. People began asking him to speak at schools too. teach other HOAs how to convert unused land into communal resources to run for city council. He declined all offers. I just wanted to be left alone, he said. Then one morning a letter arrived, not in an envelope, but nailed to the farm gate. It was a final threat from Karana. Handwritten rant promising to sue everyone involved, to tear the farm down, to bring media lawsuits to his doorstep. Walter read it, then folded it carefully and set it on fire in a tin can beside the chicken coop. Tom watched from the porch. Think she ever quit? Walter shook his head. Egos, a stubborn thing. The next week, Karen filed bankruptcy. The legal fees, the dropped property value, the mass resignation of the HOA, left her with nothing in. Then the final nail. Walter called a press conference on the newly built community stage. In the center of the farm, neighbors gathered around in folding chairs. Kids sat on hay bales. Reporters set up cameras. Kieran stood across the street, arms folded, expression like stone. Walter stepped up to the microphone, his voice strong. I never asked for this fight, but it came to my door, and I made a choice. He gestured to the farm, to the families, to the flags flying in the wind. You tried to take my home, so I built one for everyone else. Applause rang out. Karen took a step back, her eyes darting as cameras turned on her. Then Walter dropped the final bombshell. And today I'm announcing the full donation of this land to a veteran-owned nonprofit that will keep this place running for generations as a sanctuary and school for those who fought and those who want to grow. The crowd erupted. Karen turned to leave, but not before someone in the crowd held up a sign. HOA equals his own agriculture. Karen disappeared that night. Her house listed for sale. The next day, the sign out front simply read, motivated seller. Walter stood at the edge of the orchard as trucks rolled in carrying donated supplies, fencing tools, a group of veterans hopping out to lend their hands. He closed his eyes and breathed in the scent of apples and earth. He felt no hatred, no revenge, just peace. Them clapped him on the back. You won, Walter. Walter opened his eyes and watched the sun rise over the land he had saved. No, he said quietly, we all did.